So last week I started by asking you questions about you, and you told me my biography is on the way. So I'm going to save those questions for after the biography. So let's move to education. Um, I was wondering, how would you describe the current state of education in your own country?
Well, it's in Canada.
Yeah,
The first thing to say is there is no national body for education. So each province is 100% autonomous.
and how many
And
provinces are we talking about?
how many?
How many provinces are we talking about?
10 provinces and 3 territories,
I see.
13. And so there does turn out to be a certain amount of similarity, I guess, because coming from Canada culture, and you might know from the PISA results that Canada is the highest performing the highest performing English-speaking country, and it's also in the top 5 in the world, equal or better to Finland now. So I'm not saying more than when it comes to literacy, numeracy, high school graduation, university education, Canada is strong, and the teaching profession is strong compared, for example, to the U.S.
All right. You said compared to the U.S. What wonders me most about education in the U.S., and maybe you can explain that to me, is that a lot of research comes from the U.S. A lot of psychological research, a lot of educational research. We have famous psychologists who've done a lot of research about how we learn, and still the United States is not in the top lists, in the top ranking countries. How come that there is so much research going on and they're not scoring as a top country?
Because research is not practice.
I see.
Research was removed from practice, and so more specifically, in fact, Pasi Selberg, in one of his recent books, in the preface, said that so many of the good ideas are coming originally from research in the U.S., just the very point that you made, but they're not being put into practice in the U.S.
And
So,
how is that
so
possible?
that's the discrepancy, and there's not a big for us. Our practice is very important, and the research is part of that. But in the U.S., the research is separate.
I
And
see.
incidentally, that's similar in the Netherlands.
I see. Could you flip your screen maybe a bit, because I can't see you talking. I only see. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
So
Yep.
you say research is not practice, but in Canada, is research involved with education?
Yeah, and I've described this in my own work. Is that we go from practice to theory, not the other way around. And so another way I put it, and these are all part of the insights we have from implementing change, is that I put it this way as a rule of thumb. 80% of the best ideas come from leading practitioners, not from research. So
Awesome.
we are heavily immersed in practice, and the ideas are really strong. And then as we do that, we relate to research. But you relate to research with more knowledge, the knowledge of practice,
I
and it's
see.
more effective that way. So our teachers and our principals very much know the research on school improvement and school change, but it's because their practice is driving their interest.
All right. Um, how come you have done much research in the United States instead? Well, in Canada as well. But when I read your books, the United States is really an important theme. How come?
Well, as you said a few minutes ago, some of the best research exists in the U.S., so we're able to take advantage of that research. But you'll see in my writings, most of the content writing is about Canada. It's about Ontario and what we've done and how we've been successful. So there's, and it's also because of the fact that U.S. is let's see, 10 times bigger than Canada, so it's very large. It's had a long tradition of research. It's dominated research more, even compared to other countries in the world. So it's got just bigger and more present. But increasingly, you would, if you trace my research, my books, you would see in the 1980s, my books, a lot of the examples would be from the U.S., whereas since 2000, most of my good examples are from Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and some from U.S. and California where we're working. But there's more of a balance now, less of a dominance of U.S. research because they have slipped away in terms of their performance.
Yeah, all right. You told me, you mentioned research, and in this book you refer to a lot of research from the 80s. And
Yeah,
I learned in my university that I always should use up to date research if I want to make a statement. How
yeah.
come you refer to research from the 80s so much?
Well, it's where the meaning of change is where the foundation comes from. What edition is that you have?
The fifth.
Fifth, yeah. So you'll see. I haven't counted in the bibliography, but you will see. I want to capture the research over the period of the time of the last. The research on implementation started, let's say, around 1980, approximately. So what I'm doing, I want to do the 80s, the 90s, 2000, 2017, and I think you'll find a lot of examples that are recent as well as from the past. So just because it's from the past doesn't mean it's irrelevant. I select the parts of the past that had good insights that perhaps didn't get implemented well enough. But I want to claim, although I haven't looked at it this way, that it's balanced across those 4 decades.
All right. So you mentioned Canada being in the top 10 of the PISA rankings.
Yeah,
Um,
top
oh,
five.
oh, top 5, even better,
Yeah.
just like Finland. So what are Canada's the biggest challenges when it comes to education in Canada? Canada, you can't tell me there's no challenge at all because everything is going so well.
No, well, if we take the strengths first for a moment, it's the teaching profession is very strong. The collaboration we have, what we call collaborative professionalism, the way people work, where teachers are learning together. The principal is facilitating that. We have school districts that are supporting each other. We have provinces that have good policies. So that there's reasons for the strength, and there are half a dozen of them. If you ask what the problems are, I would name them this way. One is several of the provinces are doing poorly. So in the east, so we have the maritime provinces that they call Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, Newfoundland, Prince Edward Island, 4 provinces that don't do very well. The provinces that are the front runners are the big ones: Quebec, Ontario, Alberta, and British Columbia. But they're big in numbers, so that when the numbers are average, Canada shows up. So regional disparity is one problem. Second problem is almost a complete neglect of what we call First Nations, Métis, Inuit, the indigenous population. So that there's a large number of indigenous population that have been poorly treated for 150 years and are far behind in education. And recently there's a priority from the federal government and the provinces to team up to do something about that, but it hasn't shown much success yet. It's only recent. So that's a big problem. And the third problem is some degree of inequity for subgroups, although I would say when you look at our overall province, performance, just to use PISA again as the example, and Andreas Schleicher says it this way, is that Canada is one of the countries that's in the golden quadrant, we call it, so high equity and high excellence. But even within that, there's still problems of inequity. And so some subgroups are not doing so well. So for example, black students from the Caribbean, we have a lot of students from Jamaica, that they do poorly. So the inequity in subgroups are part of that problem. And then the other problem, which I think now is becoming more universal, is as societies developed in the last 10 years or 20, that the inequity between the rich and those that aren't rich gets wider and wider. That the people at the top make more and more money, people at the bottom are farther and farther down. So I would say there's not an educational problem itself, it's a societal problem where the disparity of equity with the rich getting richer and the less rich not getting richer, getting poorer, is a problem of societal cohesion eventually.
All right. Well, you mentioned equity or inequity. We have the same problems in Holland. Research shows that people from migrant backgrounds, they do get well, lesser chances, I would say. Um, for example, primary school teachers have to advise their students what education they have to follow in high school, and it seems that people from migrant background are always getting a lower advice. So,
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
um, how do you tackle a problem like this? Surely you have thoughts about it.
Yeah, well, not only that, we work on it. If you take, I mean, Ontario is what I know the best, although I would say the same about Quebec and Alberta and British Columbia. We have as a specific goal, let's just take literacy, is that we will focus on improving literacy. That's obvious. But the second goal we have that is we'll focus on reducing the differences. In other words, achieving greater equity, reducing the differences between subgroups. So, and this is how we analyze and strategize all the time. We've been doing it since 2003. So I can show you graphs that show that English language students, ESL they're called, English as a second language, we have, as you no doubt know, a lot of immigrants coming into Canada who don't speak English. Families don't speak English. And our graphs show that when they come in, they're behind the regular students, and within 5 years they catch up. So, and it's because we focus on how to support newcomers, immigrants, how to give them support in learning the language, and we pay attention specifically to whether we're making progress in reducing the inequity between them and others in Canada. So that's why we have less inequity, because we deliberately focus on it. And I can tell you that in the vast majority of cases, students from Somalia, from India, from China, any number of countries, except for the Caribbean, they are doing well when they come here in their first 5 years, and then they become equal to other students. So it's a policy. It's a policy and a practice question. If you want to deal with inequity as a society, that you have to have a deliberate value and corresponding policy and further corresponding strategies to implement that value and to mark your progress and do something about it if it's not working.
Well, 2 weeks ago, I interviewed Eric Donald Hirsch. I don't know if you know his name.
Yeah, a little bit. I know him, yeah.
Well, what he is saying in his most recent book, Why Knowledge Matters, is he says inequity exists in the United States because we implement false theories. He thinks, for example, natural learning is not natural at all. It increases gaps because you can't expect children to make their own decisions when they're so young and they shouldn't just follow their own interests. Sometimes they should just do what the teacher says.
Yeah.
What do you think of that approach? Is education polluted by false theories?
Well, there's two things about it. First of all, I think he's wrong over in terms of his conclusion. And secondly, to the extent he's right, it's because of examples where there is not a false theory. There's a non-existent theory, so that people have tried to they have superficially implemented things, and that's why it's not working. If you shift to our work, where not, I mean, the most recent work is around what we call the 6 C's: character, citizenship, communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking. If you take those as the goals and you measure, you implement them and you measure them, those are far more fundamental than knowing knowledge. They actually give the student capacity to always gain knowledge. So I think he's criticizing the examples that are superficial, and he's failing to understand the examples that are deep. That's what I think.
What he's saying is that you need some ground knowledge, some basic knowledge, in order to be able to think critically. You need
Yeah, well,
to know the
what is
principles
basic?
of
What
language.
is
Of
basic knowledge? Literacy is basic knowledge. Knowing how to read. That's basic knowledge. That will lead you to basic knowledge. So it depends. By basic knowledge, we mean the ability to read and write and communicate and do mathematics. They're all basic for sure. But if he means whether basic knowledge is knowing the date of the American Revolution, then that's not what we mean.
all right. I was just asking because I think your philosophy is creating learning schools,
Yeah,
collaboration. That's the solution to better education, instead of
right.
analyzing theories and see if natural learning versus direct instruction. That's not where we should find the answer. Um,
Yeah, we're finding the answer working directly with teachers and students and school leaders and district leaders.
All right. You just mentioned the six C's. Um,
Yeah,
it has it's closely related to the so-called 21st century skills.
right.
Um, what's your opinion about 21st century skills in education? How important are they for education?
Well, first of all, when people say 21st century skills, they are usually referring to the four that have been existing for the last 20 years.
Yes.
So collaboration, communication, critical thinking, and creativity. So the first thing is those four have not really developed very much. I mean, there's a little bit of critical thinking. There's certainly not much creativity. And what we have done is two things. We've added character education and citizenship, so now we have six instead of four. But the two that we added, character and citizenship, are more applied. They're more having to do with the person. It's more having to do with the world, because character and citizenship are kind of relevant to the day-to-day life of students. So it makes, all of a sudden, by having the six C's, you have something that's very relevant to students. And what we do is I would say that character education and citizenship, and now we're finding creativity, those three are what I call catalytic C's. And a catalytic C is one is if you use it, it leads to the others. It's a catalyst for the others. So I think we have found the key, and it's in our book. The book we just published is called Deep Learning. We found the key to the 21st century skills coming alive. And then the question of why they're important, the better label for them these days for us is not 21st century skills, that they can be called that, but we prefer to call them global competencies. And global competencies are the skills that people need to live in the complex society of 2018. Global, interactive, lack of jobs, all kinds of complexity. To be able to live effectively in the current world requires you to have the six C's.
And there's also room for technology.
Yeah, technology is, first of all, even if there's not room for it, it forces itself in because it's everywhere and it's imposing. And we've been able to, our phrase is, pedagogy is the driver, technology is the accelerator. So technology is very much there. And when, if you saw our model of learning in our new book, it's got, the learning piece has four things. Good pedagogical practices, that's one of four. Partnerships between students, teachers, and families, that's the second one. Change the learning environment so it's better is the third one. And the final one is called leveraging digital, which is using digital to make everything work better. So that technology is a very strong part of our solution, but it's because it's integrated.
Technology is really a sensitive subject in the Netherlands because many schools don't have the means or the financial means to be digital. It's really expensive, all those methods and books and computers. We are really struggling in the Netherlands to make sure every school has 24/7 access to what you call ubiquitous technologies. So, what's the current state in Canada? How are schools coping with the technology?
Well, I did a short book called Stratosphere about in 2012 that laid this out. It's only 100 pages long, but here's the answer: every society now, and there's no excuse, needs to provide wireless, or the. In other words, I'm now not talking about the content of the education policy, but the infrastructure. So I guess I want to say first of all that it's inevitable that access to wireless infrastructure is going to be for the whole world anyways. That's inevitable. And if it costs governments to do it, they have to do it. It has a life of its own anyways. That's one thing. Secondly, in terms of the devices, it's also the case that billions of people have devices, iPhones, and that inexpensive ones included. And so I'm not thinking of very expensive textbooks and or machines and all of that expense. I'm thinking of the basics, which is access to information, which is the wireless infrastructure, and a device to access that. And then, of course, it happens, you have to figure out the pedagogy. But as I don't agree at all that the problem is money, because the market, and you can go to India or to China, and the number of cell phones that young people are having are just growing a mile a minute. So I don't think the market is the problem. I think it's the use of the pedagogical use of the information that's the issue.
What digital skills should students today possess in order to um, be prepared for the future?
Well, the skills are the 6 C's. That's what they need.
I mean the digital skills like information literacy, like media literacy, as
Uh,
they are
yeah,
described in the Partnership for 21st Century Learning
yeah.
(P21).
Well, mostly, I think mostly for starters, they need buddies, friends. And so I mean, I'm talking about the technical use now. If students don't have any trouble learning fast from each other on the technical part, it's not quite your question, but the sheer access, there's no problem whatsoever because students that learn a mile a minute, it's just fast. Then I think they do need, and our 6 C's actually include what you described. So, for example, citizenship includes being a digital citizenship. What are the responsibilities of how you do critical thinking? Includes how do you examine information and not accept it as truth just because it's on the internet. So those 6 C's include very specifically having a critical relationship to the digital world.
When we talk about digital, you referred to this book in
Yeah,
this book. And
yeah.
what you're saying is if we want to catch up with corporates, if we want to catch up with digital society as education, we need to be more agile. And this model, which Eric Rice describes, a lean startup model, is a possibility, is a possible way of adjusting education. Do you have examples of schools that have successfully implemented these principles already?
Yeah, well, I don't actually use the word agile in my own writing very much, but that's like a side point. But if you take what the change paradigm that Eric has, it's about starting into action faster, working with, he calls it minimal viable products to begin with. So, and that you get better by fast learning, by trying something, not being judgmental, describing what works, fixing it. So it's a rapid implementation through, we call it ready, fire, aim sometimes. So ready, fire is the action, aim is pulling out what you learned. And that's what we're doing in deep learning. If you get a chance to read the book, which is called Deep Learning, which is called Engage the World, but Deep Learning, Engage the World, Change the World. We have lots of examples in there, but I can just give you one from Ontario. The Ottawa Catholic School Board has 84 schools, and they've been working with us for 3 years. The first year they had 7 schools start to do this, so it was fairly quick startup, even though it's only 7 out of 84. The second year that they added 21 more. They had a rollout plan. And the third year, all the rest of them came in. So in the third year, which is only 24 months, because you have 0 month, 12 months, another 12, all 84 schools are doing this work. That's what I call a lean startup, because now we have lots of examples from them. They have video examples all over the place. One of the means that we have of capturing this, and the individuals, we have over 1,000 schools in 7 countries doing this, is they're producing lots of videos, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, of examples of what the work looks like. So it's very rapid, it's very conducive to the digital world of doing things, sharing them quickly, learning from each other, getting together. So I think this is, if you want to say something, I would say literacy takes some years to develop, and that's good, that's fine. But the 6 C's can happen much more rapidly. So we're talking about having innovation in these schools that is more deep learning, and that some systems who have narrow testing, as is in some aspects of the States, are not friendly to this kind of way of working. There's too much pressure on getting the test done. And so we have to deal with the policies, but I know on the ground that our 1,000 schools, lots of them, are moving quickly, and it's similar to a fast startup. I wouldn't say it has all the technical features that Eric talks about, but the philosophy is similar, the strategy is similar, whereas you get to action fast, you do something that's more meaningful, you learn from it fast, you spread from it, you reinforce and sort out the quality, and you then, in our case, assess the impact on the 6 C's.
Well, you talk about minimum viable product. Are schools the way they are, the traditional schools, are they viable in 10 years?
No, they aren't. And I mean, this is a race. I guess the race is between. I think you probably know Richard Elmore's work from Harvard, who is part of this work, and he's become quite critical of the possibilities of the public education system. But the debate it kind of goes like this. We both, to take Elmore and myself, we both agree that the current system is outdated. So that's point one. Point two, I say, let's start changing the current system. And in the schools we're seeing actually that teachers and students want to change, and if they get the right support, they do change. He's saying the public system is hopeless, and that the natural evolution of technology and networks and others will destroy the public system, and there'll be a much more kind of complex learning environment that will evolve, more based on networks and nodes and other things like that. So he might be right, but what we're doing is going to prepare students to be better for that. But there's no doubt about it that the days of the current system are numbered, because the current system doesn't work. And I just want to say 2 things about it. One is the obvious part, which is higher percentage of students are not engaged in learning in the regular system as they go up the grade levels. But let's try this one for an example. Is it possible for a student in the current system to get good grades all the way through, including graduating with good grades, and still not be good at life? And the answer, almost everyone says it spontaneously, yeah, that you can get good grades, but living in a complex society takes us back to the 6 C's.
Well, you just pictured Richard's view. One of my questions for you is, what does education look like in 20 years? What's your view on this topic? What does a school look? What could a school look like in 20 years? Let's say it that way.
Well, I think it'll be a hive of activity around the 6 C's. I haven't described the physical structure yet, but I think the substance of learning will be groups of students and teachers and others studying the 6 C's. There may not be a building the way we see it now, because one of our 4 pieces of the learning of learning is the learning environment. If the learning environment becomes the world or the region, you can see a lot more hubs and activities. So I think it will. I think that there are experts on learning environments now, physical learning environments, that are changing things to be more learner friendly, more fluid, more active. So I think we're going to see some big changes that way. It won't look like the school we know now. Even on a small basis, if we take the Ottawa example, several of those schools have changed their internal learning environment. They have spaces for students to work that never existed before. They have fewer walls. They have it just looks and feels differently, more like an open market instead of a series of classrooms. So there's changes coming, and we want to make it pedagogy and the physical changes to be tied together.
You say it's possible to be really good at math and language and not be prepared for life. So are
Yeah.
we still measuring the right outcomes when we talk about PISA, for example, who measure literacy and mathematics?
Yeah, I don't think it's choosing one over the other, but I mean, PISA measures science literacy and math at age 15, so it's only one measure. You might know that recently PISA is also measuring collaborative problem solving and citizenship. And
Project
so,
2030, that is.
say that again.
Project 2030.
Yeah,
Is
that's
that what
one.
you mean?
So there again. So I don't think the answer is we don't assess literacy. We throw it out. I think we keep that, but we add to that the deeper goals that we're talking about. And for me, they're the 6 C's.
All right. So
And measuring the outcomes of the 6 C's. A graduate of our deep learning school, if you assess them on the 6 C's, you would find that they are, if they learn well, that they're strong on the 6 C's, and therefore I'll say they're prepared for life.
all right. So I've got 10 minutes left. I see I'm minding the time.
Yeah. Okay.
I always say to people, practice what you preach. Now you were a dean. You were dean of the Institute of Education in Ontario.
Right.
Um, so you had to be a leader. What did your leadership look like back in those days? How would you describe yourself as a leader, and how did you make sure you were leading a learning organization?
Well, I was a dean for 15 years, 7 or so years each, from 1988 to 2003, in 2 different related institutions. So that's the context. First, I would say um, that um, one of the reasons I took the job was to learn about change by doing change. So we were creating institutions of getting more innovation, getting closer to schools, learning how to implement things. So all of those things. If you ask me specifically what I learned, this is in my new autobiography that's coming out in April from Routledge. It's called Surreal Change, but it's done. I'm just actually proofing the last pages. What you'll see in there, what did I learn about change? One is the importance of having a strong team. So my core team of 3 or 4 people, I selected them carefully. I gave them autonomy. We learned from each other. So rather than being a lone leader, you need the team. That's one thing. Second, to support innovation, I guess I'll say selective innovation, where you try things that are new. It's not quite lean startup, but one of the things we did, we changed teacher education. So cohorts of 6 students were working in a school, not one student, one classroom, but a group of students would work in a school, and the school would be the community of learning. We created a lot of collaborative cultures in schools, working with school districts in the Toronto region. So the whole basis of Andy's my professional capital came from that applied work, learning how to develop better collaboration.
I
So
see.
quite a lot of things, I would say.
It reminds me a lot of this book, what you just said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That was in some ways the outcome of our applied work.
That's what I mean. Yeah, well, this
Yeah,
was a
we did.
really useful tool for me and a
Yeah,
really nice.
yeah, we did. Preceding that was a trilogy. Andy did the second and the third one with me, but we did it with the teachers union. It was called "What's Worth Fighting For." So we did a trilogy. First book, "What's Worth Fighting For," in the principalship. Yeah, I did that. Sorry, myself. Then Andy and I teamed up and did "What's Worth Fighting For in Your School," which was the collaborative culture. So working on those applied formulations of strategies for change around particular problems was what I did during that period,
All
and
right.
still do.
Yeah, nice. I have two more questions for you.
Yeah.
What do you advise teachers? Any teacher who is in a working environment where there is no leadership, where there is a lack of leadership, or you witness leadership that is not effective at all. Where do you start as a teacher when your leadership is not going to take the steps that are needed to change your organization? What's the power of a teacher? What can you do?
Yeah, well, it's the same question for a school principal if their local leadership at the municipality is not very good. Anybody who's in an organization where the leadership is not good. I think the first advice is we know that there is power in relating to other peers. So I would, if I were in that situation, I would minimize my relationship to the leadership that's ineffective, try to keep them from bothering me, and I would team up with other teachers inside my school or across school. I might hope for some changes in the leadership, either because that leader sees that they're not effective and wants to change, or because there's a replacement. And we have been, I wrote the book called The Principal, where we said here are the characteristics of school leaders that are effective. So we're pushing the system, keep adding more leaders who are effective, who will help teachers work together, etc. So I guess say minimize the negative influence, maximize your peer thing so you're not alone and you can accomplish some things together, and just do the work and and not spend your life being frustrated just because the other person isn't very good, the leader. Otherwise, you waste a lot of energy.
Have you seen examples of schools that have changed as a whole, but even without a principal that was leading, just by a team of teachers that said, "Oh, let's change the system."
I think, I mean, there are a few examples where schools have been quite good collaboratively, and the principal has been weak or not good. There are a few of examples like that, but there's no examples that are sustained. Yeah, that last. So we want the system to sustain itself, and you'll know in another small book I did about 3 years ago is called Indelible Leadership, and it's about school principals and others. And basically, it says the job of the leader is to create a collaborative culture to the point where the leader becomes more dispensable for the future because the group is strong, and the group will carry on because the next leader will be a collaborative. So what you want are leaders who participate as learners and keep fueling collaborative leadership. So there's always leaders coming, but you do need a leader for sustainability because there's too many things outside that will interfere with you.
Thank you. My last question for you is: how about you? What does your future look like? Because it doesn't seem that you're retiring at all.
No, it's. I think about that a certain amount now, and people ask me because I'm 77, so that means there's limited in any case. So I decided to keep busy. We have so many things going on, and my future, first of all, is I have a really great team of about 5 people that work with me. So we really are a strong team that they will carry on without me at some point. And I might slow down a little bit, but in terms of travel, but not much. So
Do
I
you have
guess
any hobbies except for
yeah, we
education?
not really. I mean, we have a summer place up at a cottage north of Toronto that I spend a lot of time in the summer there. So outdoors, the boat, family. I mean, I used to play tennis and golf more, but I'm getting too old for that. So so the yeah, just the family, different kinds of travel, being able to enjoy the summer, those 2 or 3 months, and then a lot of my hobbies, in a sense, are built into the variety of work we do. I'm working a lot in 7 countries, so that itself is kind of a global holiday.
So there will still be books coming and research coming. Well, that's good.
I,
Good news
I
for.
think so. Yeah, yeah. When you get a chance to get my new book when it comes out in April, the surreal change, and you'll see my life as it's on. It's only 100 pages long, so it's quite, people find it quite interesting.
I see a lot of researchers that have done really important research, like you, like Peter Senchi, like
Yeah,
Robert Quinn. They're all on a certain age. They're all retiring or.
yeah.
Who's the next generation? Um,
Well,
um,
I think we talked about. I'll tell you 3 names in a minute, but we talked about that before because um, when I was starting up as, let's say, our group of us as young scholars in the 80s and 90s, there was no next generation immediately happening. We were there when we were the only ones, I'm going to say almost. But in the last 8 years, there have been some new superstars who are around age 35 to 40. And one of them is my chief researcher, Santiago Rincon Gallardo. Another one is Carol Campbell, who's Scottish, who works with us in Ontario, who I hired 10 years ago and is now like a new superstar. A third one that's quite good is he's about in his early 30s. His name is Simon Breakspear. It's in Sydney. So we have now some newcomers, and they are working with other people to cause newcomers. So I would say the story is we were there was a gap, so there was kind of not much happening. And now these young people, because these people are 40, let's say 35 years younger than us, and yet they're still, you know, established as 35 or 40-year-olds. So I'm encouraged that there's some new wave of leaders that will come up in this field that are educational change experts that are every good as we are, if not better.
well, that's an excellent end of this interview. I would like you to thank you very much for your time, for your inspiration. You have inspired me really a lot and given me a lot of tools, not only in your books but also your website. For example, the coherence framework was really useful to me. So, also on behalf of all my readers and teachers, I know many
Yeah,
thanks, and I hope to read many books, many more books, and that you have endless energy and will keep continuing what you do.
yeah, I hope so. Well, thank you. It's enjoyable. You were well prepared, so I enjoyed the interview.
Thank you very much. Okay, have a
Yeah,
good day then.
you too. Take care.
Bye.